Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Clock Management. This is Kevin Tompkins here on the Optimus Fantasy YouTube channel. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in this beautiful country of ours. Look, last week we went through a lot of the running backs. This week we want to give some wide receivers some love. So we're going to give out some grades. We're going to be, we're not going to be super nice to some of these guys. I just want to put that out there right away. But look, we're 6 weeks through the NFL season. We have separated the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. So, it's time to let's just get right into it because, there's a lot of wide receivers out there that people have questions about. If you have questions also about some of these wide receivers and you want you want me to go over some of these guys, drop them in the chat because I'm just going to talk about some wide receivers that are at least piquing my interest. Good and bad. So, drop them in the chat if you have any questions, but you know what? We're going to go right into it here. Let's talk about, let's start at the top. Let's start with Marvin Harrison Jr. because the thesis for Marvin Harrison Jr. all season was, in the off season, I should say, was that we want his ADOT to come down. We want him to be more of a target earner with Trey McBride. And that really just hasn't happened. And look, I know Marvin Harrison got hurt. Only ran 24% of the routes, 23% of the routes. But look, everything that we've seen here, this is, game logs here. We're still looking at some pretty underwhelming stuff, especially if he's not scoring touchdowns. Like he had a 4 for 98. But other than that, we're looking at the ADOT did come down. He was about at like a 14, 15 yard ADOT last season. So he's brought that down to a 12.6, which is kind of what we want in terms of a sweet spot. I mean, it's a little over what you want. Typical wide receiver ADOTs, we're looking at about for like a top end receiver, we're looking at between 10 and 11 and a half or so is like the real top end. So he's just a little bit over that. But 17.8% target share, not going to cut it for a guy like that. Even the first read stuff, almost 20%, not super where you want. And kind of to, compare that with a guy like Trey McBride, 32% first read target share. So when Kyler Murray or in last week, yesterday's case, Jacoby Brissett, he's just out here targeting Trey McBride. Like Trey McBride is the top receiver in this offense, and Marvin Harrison is just almost less than, which it's a shame in your second season after being, a top pick in the NFL draft. So it's super tough to see for a guy like Marvin Harrison who has no problem like getting out there running routes. Look, he's running all the routes that he can. He's basically been, last season, he was pigeonholed as like the X receiver and barely played in the slot. Not as much this season in terms of, what we're seeing there. So at least that's good. Yards per out run, we're looking at 1.71. So like it's fine, but your targets per route run, you're running a lot of routes. You're not getting as targeted, as you should be. That leads me to have serious questions about not just the offensive environment for anybody else besides Trey McBride. It seems like Marvin Harrison is kind of blending in with the Zay Jones and the Michael Wilsons and guys like that, where you want him. And I know that we're spoiled by wide receivers like Justin Jefferson and Garrett Wilson and Brandon Ayuk guys and Jamar Chase, guys that have popped immediately when they've gotten on the field. We're spoiled by that. But we're looking at not much improvement from like the talent aspect. How the Arizona and Drew Petzing has used him is like a little bit better, but it really hasn't done much for Harrison in terms of wanting to get his, the profile up there. So that's where we're at with him. And then let's, because we went to Harrison, let's kind of just go down the line here. Obviously, Drake London is playing tonight. For Harrison's grade, because we are, look, it's report card season. not really. It's October. Maybe the first report card is coming out maybe a month or so before Thanksgiving. But look, it's got to be like a C right now. It's not that impressive, at least what Harrison has done from like a metric standpoint, and then turning in what the opportunity that he's getting on the field and turning that into tangible like fantasy. Goodness, we don't have that right now. So going over to Drake London, obviously the Falcons do play tonight, but everything that we've seen obviously had to bye in week 5 and then plays tonight. But everything you want from a target earning wide receiver 1 in a condensed offense, that's what we're getting with Drake London. So, we're looking at a ton of air yards. We're getting production across the board. Like, he was kind of sneaking through, lying in the weeds a little bit after that week 1, 3 for 49, 5 for 45, came out with 10 targets against Washington, 8 for 110 and a touchdown, ton of air yards. We want him to be efficient, two yards per route run on the season here. So I am very, very much encouraged. And at least the first read target stuff, 38%. It's clear Michael Penix is targeting him above everybody else in this offense. So that's what we want. I have no problems at all with Drake London as a top end wide receiver. Probably would get an A-. I want to see more of the week 4 stuff versus anything from like week 2. But I have no problems with Drake London going forward. This one's tough. I'll give. I think I gave London an A-. This one is tough though with Zay Flowers because of the offense the way it is right now. It's almost like you can't really fault him for it because it's not his fault. But we just have to grade on what we have right now with a guy like Zay Flowers. So. Look, the first couple weeks, awesome. We kind of had a crap game against the Detroit Lions, but other than that, what we like to see the air yard stuff. Runs a little shorter A-dot, but that's totally fine because they give him some managed touches as well. At the line of scrimmage, you give him that every so often. But more or less, he's like just the middle of the field monster for Lamar Jackson and whoever the quarterback is in Baltimore. But yeah, first read stuff is all right there. 31%, 32%. Targets per out run, 25%. So like really good. That's a quarter of the routes you run. You're targeted on, one of every 4 routes. So that's awesome. 2.32 yards per route run. Look. Is the role incredibly strong for a guy like Zay Flowers? Absolutely. Is the situation maybe not super conducive right now to getting what we want out of Zay Flowers? Absolutely. Both can be true in that case. So it makes it tougher to grade Zay Flowers because we're going to look at this and then we're going to have the built-in excuse of, he had Cooper Rush in, the first couple weeks of the season. He had, whether it's Tyler Huntley. Hopefully they're going to get Lamar Jackson back. That would be awesome for everybody involved. But, as we stand right now, it's not great for Zay Flowers. We're hoping Lamar Jackson, fingers crossed, can come back after the bye week in week 8 against Chicago. So I would say B+ for Zay Flowers right now because everything we want to see from Zay Flowers in terms of a breakout, a further incremental breakout we're getting. It's just the situation kind of sucks right now. So hopefully we get some sort of like building off of that going forward. So the Buffalo guys are going to be very, very interesting in terms of obviously this whole situation with how not condensed this offense is. We know anybody can lead this team in targets in any given week, whether it's Khalil Shakir, Palmer, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, even James Cook. Like all these guys are just, kind of cannibalizing each other from like the wide receiver position. Khalil Shakir feels the most safe because he is the one that's getting more scheme touches than anybody else in this offense outside of maybe Dalton Kincaid. But I would say Kincaid in that kind of aspect is second to Shakir. But Shakir is still pretty efficient for what he is. We know he's a shorter A dot kind of guy, runs in the slot, for a majority of the time. 14 targets the last 2 weeks, over 100 yards here. Like you're never gonna get the air yards, I should say. Almost a 20% target share. Like in this offense, when you're looking at, some of the Bills stuff in terms of like team stuff, Keon Coleman is a 20% target share. Like that's fine. And look, 18%, 20%, 16% for Dalton Kincaid. Josh Palmer's even there, 12%. But it's all gonna, one takes from the other takes from the other. It's not a super great situation, but if I were gonna hang my hat on anybody in this offense to be like a target earner, it's going to be Khalil Shakir. Because he is like their manufactured extension of the run game, where that's what Joe Brady, offensive coordinator, wants to do with the Bills. He wants to, run the ball almost at all costs. That's why you're seeing a lot of James Cook, dominating touches, especially in the run game, because he's put a pretty big gap between himself and Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. But as an extension of the run game, Khalil Shakir has been pretty fantastic. Targets per out run increased in the last 2 weeks. We're talking 25% and 31% in his last 2 games against the Saints and Patriots. They're going to play tonight against the Atlanta Falcons. So I would expect a little bit more of the same here. So I would give Khalil Shakir probably a B- because I feel like him over anybody else. And let's look at like Keon Coleman here, because Keon Coleman had that awesome week 1. We thought we were in for like the true breakout with Keon Coleman. We really haven't gotten that, because the routes, he was at a 94% clip with his routes, and then has steadily fallen off to where he's probably a more consistent like 70 to 75, maybe 80 in a given week. But yeah, target share is like right there. He's getting targeted. The Bills usually don't have like a high pass attempt. So that's going to skew some of that for the Bills. But 20% targets per out run is like fine. Yards per out run, 1.5 is like not super great. Especially if the Bills aren't going to be having a lot of pass attempts, not a lot of dropbacks. As we've seen with like offenses that do not, particularly pass the ball in volume, like we saw the Eagles last season, where some of those numbers, but for like AJ Brown, for Devonta Smith, can be inflated, especially in the yards per out run, especially in the targets per out run, because there's just not a lot of routes to run. If a team's going to be winning all the time and they're going to be salty games away, those numbers are going to be inflated. So maybe the 1.54 yards per route run for Keon Coleman, that's actually telling a story of maybe Keon Coleman is just like below average in terms of what he's doing, because if that's the inflated number, that's kind of surprising there. So, you're probably rostering Keon Coleman, but it doesn't feel great. He feels like lesser than Rashad Bateman right now, where they're involved in the offense, they're running routes, but they're just very situational in terms of the way they earn their targets. So, and they're just, Keon Coleman, I would say, is a distant third in the receiving pecking order, but behind Shakir, behind Dalton Kincaid, probably in line with, the James Cook, and that those two could kind of flip-flop in terms of target earning every week. But yeah, I'm just not a big fan of Keon Coleman. I would probably give him a D. Moving over to Carolina, I know we're going to get Jalen Coker in the next week or so. That's going to be awesome. Pat McMillan, though, everything that you want from a top wide receiver, especially in your first 6 games of the season, everything you've wanted from him, you're getting a top line wide receiver. You're basically getting year 1 Drake London out of him, where maybe some of the passing stuff is a bit, with like Bryce Young, maybe that's not consistent. And Drake London obviously was in an Arthur Smith offense, didn't have much consistency to speak of there. But look, 43% of the air yards for McMillan. He runs almost all the routes in a given week. No game below 90% in the last 5 weeks. 20, almost a 30% first read target share. That's very good. Targets per outrun, 20, almost 23%. Yards per outrun, 1.82. I have no problem. And the fact that he's doing this with Bryce Young, I think speaks pretty highly to his McMillan's skill in earning targets. So yeah, right now we're looking at 6 games. We're looking at almost 8 targets per game for Ted McMillan. And granted, some of the efficiency is not quite there. Scored 2 touchdowns yesterday, so that certainly helped with the fantasy scoring wise. We haven't quite gotten that with McMillan, but the role is incredibly strong. So I have no problems whatsoever with Ted McMillan. I think through the first 6 games of the season on an offense that we thought would be up and down a bit, that he has delivered and then some. So I would say McMillan would be a very nice buy low candidate. And I know it's tough because he scored 2 touchdowns, but look at the other 5 games and he doesn't really pop outside the 6 for 100 game. But I think he's a guy that you could probably get cheaper than you normally would, especially because Carolina kind of has a little bit of a stink on it in terms of public perception. So McMillan would be just an easy B+, and he still has a lot of room to maneuver. He feels like a guy that we're going to be drafting in the 3rd round next year after, he comes on in the second half of the season and ends up with 125 targets, 80 for 1,000 and 7 touchdowns. That feels like a guy where you're going to be buying the upside, the further upside, the incremental stuff from McMillan in drafts in 2026. So that's where I want a guy like McMillan on teams. And yeah, he's probably more of a wide receiver 3 and you draft him as a wide receiver 2 right now. And that's fine. I think he could be a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. So yeah, B+, easy. Yeah, and what doesn't help is he doesn't have any help from the rest of his offense. Xavier Legette has not been very good. 0.38 yards per outrun. Has not really earned targets. Look at 12.8% targets per outrun. That's not good at all. That's one of the worst marks. How many routes does he run? 133. I want to look at who has the worst yards per outrun among all wide receivers, because I would bet he's probably up there. He's the 4th lowest of all wide receivers that have run at least 75 routes. Arian Smith, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Kamir DK, and Xavier Legette. And look, it stinks. He's a 1st round pick, technically 32nd pick overall, but it's just not good to come out as a 1st round pick in your 2nd season on a team that desperately needs a second target. Jatavian Sanders has been out. Jalen Coker has been out. Hunter Renfrow is a 31-year-old accountant. It's not great, but Xavier Legette could really help out Bryce Young, and just has not earned targets, has not been very efficient with the targets that he does get. I would not be surprised if when Jalen Coker does come back that he is just maybe not sent to 0, but is probably more of a rotational guy, because they have trotted out Bryson Tremaine. They have used Jimmy Horn in the last couple weeks here, where he feels like a little bit of a Coker in terms of how he organically got into the offensive game plan, is starting to run a few routes. He's caught all 4 of his targets. It could be a situation where say Xavier Legette, thanks, good try, but we're going to get people who actually know what they're doing on offense. We're going to try to get them the ball. So it stinks for McMillan because, it could be a lot better for him. He could be, even for, because he's getting a lot of attention. You don't have to pay a lot of attention to some of these other guys. You don't have to pay attention to Hunter Renfrow for the most part. Another team on bye, the Chicago Footballing Bears. DJ Moore. Well, I'm going to talk about Roma Dunze, but DJ Moore has been pigeonholed as like the Debo in this offense. Low ADOT, getting rush attempts, very like minimal target earning. Like he is a far cry from what he was even in his first season in Chicago. And then some of the stuff at the end of his Carolina tenure. But yeah, 60% target share, 14.6 targets per route run, 1.26 yards per route run. That's tough. That is tough for a guy who I know is talented, but is like creeping up on 28, 29 years old, and is clearly not the top option in this offense anymore. That's what we're seeing with DJ Moore, where you drafted him in like the 5th, 6th round. You're trying your best to get return on investment. But like, the sunk cost fallacy and everything like that. But I don't think that, DJ Moore, and I know you gotta have to start him for bye weeks. The player pool kind of widens a bit because you obviously have guys that aren't going to be playing in a given week. So that just extends like the wide receiver pool by, 8 to 10 players, one running backs, maybe 4 to 5 tight ends, a couple here and there. But DJ Moore in like a full strength week, it feels like, and I know we want to buy the offense. We want to buy the Chicago Bears offense in terms of an offense that can get the ball out to multiple people. But DJ Moore is just not involved like that anymore. It is Roma Dunze. So Roma Dunze has been everything as advertised this season. 27% target share, 24 almost a 24% targets per route run, 2.1 yards per route run, like everything that we wanted to see out of a year 2 kind of a breakout. We're seeing that with Roma Dunze. We'll see. They do play the Commanders tonight. But yeah, dude who ran all the routes last season was in the top 5 in raw routes run last season in that offense for Chicago with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Got on the field, was able to run routes, now doing that and absolutely leveling up in the Ben Johnson offense here. So DJ Moore, I would give a D-. Roma Dunze, I give I'd say B+. A-. No, I'll go A-. Because I'm really intrigued by what he can do. He scored a touchdown in every game this season. 5 touchdowns in 4 games. That's probably not going to continue, but at least the target earning stuff, because target earning is absolutely a skill. We're getting that and then some with Roma Dunze. I do want to talk about Luther Burden, though, because that could be something where, and we've seen it time and time again with some of these rookie wide receivers that have come out after a bye and are much more involved in their team's offense. We haven't seen too much out of Luther Burden. Obviously, we had that flea flicker in week 3 against Dallas where, 101 and a touchdown. We thought that could have been a launching point for Burden. We did not get that. We actually saw a little bit of backslide in routes. And that's because Olamide Zaccheaus is running a ton of routes as well. So whether or not the Bears use Burden in the slot more to kind of use, maybe Zaccheaus as a rotational guy, because Zaccheaus has been he hasn't been fantasy relevant. He's just been very, very annoying for fantasy managers because we know Burden is the guy we want out there based on the athleticism. Like we've seen it for years and years with Zaccheaus, whether he was in Washington or Atlanta or Philadelphia, like we've seen it. So that's a guy. That's what we're hoping for Luther Burden, that maybe post bye we're going to get a bump up here. Cincinnati. So you don't need me to tell you to start Jamar Chase, to start T. Higgins, but the offensive environment with Joe Flacco, definitely an upgrade over Jake Browning. Look, everything we want from Jamar Chase, 2.16 yards per route run, 26% targets per route run. You know, Jamar Chase is like a top 3 wide receiver in football. You don't need me to tell you that. T. Higgins, much less than, has really only gotten by on touchdowns, and maybe that's a lot of the Jake Browning stuff too. We got his best game of the season outside of touchdowns, 5 for 62. His best target earning, like 8 targets, but being more efficient on them than what he was when he had 9 targets, 3 for 56 and a touchdown. Continues to run all the routes. You know, it's really just the efficiency for T. Higgins that has not been there. And while even a Jake Browning-led offense could support Jamar Chase, it was probably not an offense that could support another guy that could support T. Higgins as well. So hopefully now with Joe Flacco, we are starting to see a little bit more of that. So I think because of the role that he has and has been in the last couple of years, I think he's a buy low as well. And it's not going to take much because I think a lot of people are sick of T. Higgins. A lot of people wanted to, wanted to say T. Higgins is overrated the last couple of years. I do not see that. And, I'm not biased at all, even though I have his jersey right back there. But I do actually think T. Higgins is underrated from his role in an offense that passes a ton. One of the highest PROE teams in the NFL the last 3 seasons running. Granted, that was Joe Burrow, but Joe Flacco has, with last season, at the end of the season with the Cleveland Browns, he supported high pass rate over expected teams as well. Zach Taylor's not afraid to hey, do what Joe Burrow did. That's pretty much what we're getting here, just a lesser than, maybe with some more variance for T. Higgins. So I do like him in terms of a guy that is a buy low candidate that has matched Jamar Chase and surpassed him in weeks. And again, that was with Joe Burrow. But why can't T. Higgins put up 6 for 65, every week if they're going to be passing a ton? I mean, Chase Brown is clearly not it. Chase Brown has been one of the most inefficient running backs in football. Now Mike Gesicki is hurt. They're crying out for any sort of pass catching. Andre Yoshivas is literally an all exercise player. He's earned 16 targets in 6 games on 80% of routes. That's where we're at now. But yeah, so T. Higgins, I would say incomplete if you're going to have me rank him. And then Jamar Chase, obviously, I think he's just a B right now because we're seeing a less than version of him right now. Cleveland. That's speaking of tough. Jerry Jeudy is very tough. Obviously, the offense was with Joe Flacco. Now it's Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel comes out, targets Jerry Jeudy 13 times. It's just there's no efficiency in this passing game unless you're a tight end. So Cedric Tillman has been hurt the last couple weeks. There's nobody else that's really taken some of the mantle. Isaiah Bond has run routes and has earned, he's earned 11 targets in the past 2 weeks. That's not nothing, especially for a rookie. But obviously 4 catches for 38 yards isn't going to move any needles. So, 25% targets per route run, fine. But it's just the inefficiency. Less than 1 yard per route run for Jerry Jeudy. So you can't start him. You can roster him. The role is strong. He's getting targeted. It's just, I don't know. I think Jerry Jeudy just might be one of the more overrated wide receivers in football. The only time where he really produced was the Jameis Winston era there for the Browns in last season. So that's what's been really, really tough. I see you in the comments here, ZDs. It would be Krosky, Merritt, and London by far. I don't think Bijan can pick up the slack, and Olamide Zaccheaus is rarely used in the offense. Build off of JCM and London there. I think you're Oh, it can't mix one pair of two. Can't mix match. Yeah, it'd be Crossy Merritt in London by absolute far over Bijan and Alameda. But yeah, Jerry Jeudy, I would say I would give. I didn't give an F, but I think I might give an F to Jerry Jeudy. I think he's earned it, and it's maybe not through like some total fault of him, but the combination of Jerry Jeudy being inefficient, the offense not exactly helping him out. Now he has to kind of work in with a rookie quarterback. Yeah, it's tough. I think you got to give him an F. Look, CeeDee Lamb hopefully can come back next week. He's missed the last 4 games. CeeDee Lamb and CeeDee Lamb. That's fine. But this is why you go out and get a guy like George Pickens. You know, he's had six touchdowns in his last 5 games. And you're talking about picking up the pieces of this passing game and running with your opportunity. That's been George Pickens. Last week, yesterday against Carolina, 63% of the air yards, almost a 35% target share. Targeted on 36% targets per out run. What more can you say about George Pickens? So, look, the dude was hopping and jumping everywhere yesterday, wanting to hurdle over everybody. Look, if I had George Pickens' talent and I was producing and I scored 6 touchdowns in my last 5 games, I'd probably be jumping too. That said, I said it yesterday on the Express with Nate Polvo. Go check that out on Optimus after this video. But because we talked about every week 6 game that was played on Sunday. Well, I think Pickens is a sneaky buy low candidate because obviously, I think he's just a buy. Or no. He's a sell. That's what I said. He was a sell. Because they're getting CeeDee Lamb back, I don't think you're going to be getting this kind of market share with Pickens going forward. You're gonna be getting quite a bit of market share, but I don't think you're going to be getting wide receiver 1 level market share with Dak Prescott. So I would try to get to like the gullible members of your league and be like, look, I got a wide receiver 1. His name is George Pickens. He likes to jump around a lot. Can I have Bijan Robinson? I don't think you can get Bijan Robinson for him. But if you're looking for a running back, you could probably pair Pickens with like an Achane, or pair Pickens with somebody and try to go for like a Devon Achane, or you could go for Bijan Robinson. You could probably get him straight up for Josh Jacobs. You'd probably get Josh Jacobs for him, I think. So I do like that, and I'm interested. Ryan Flournoy has really come on, is running routes. And I know Jalen Tolbert has been running a ton of routes. I'm interested to see, because Jalen Tolbert has run a ton of routes. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is going to be coming back. Who they send to 0. It won't quite be 0, but it will be certainly a less than. I wouldn't be shocked if the guy that actually continues to run routes in this offense is Ryan Flournoy over Tolbert. He's shown the efficiency. He's been pretty solid. Like he had that week 5, 6 for 114. Like he's obviously earned more time on the field. So that's where I have some questions when CeeDee Lamb does come back in hopefully week 7. But yeah, George Pickens, I would give an A+ because he's taken the ball and run with it. And then this is the real question for when CeeDee Lamb comes back, whether it's Tolbert or Flournoy. That's the 3rd wide receiver that also runs routes in 11 personnel. Denver, there's really not too much to talk about here because Courtland Sutton has such a stranglehold on the market share. Runs almost 100% of routes every other week, it seems like. And is clearly the top target for Bo Nix. Troy Franklin does run quite a bit of routes. He is like the only other guy you can pencil in for routes. But just like everybody else in this offense with, obviously multiple tight ends, multiple running backs, they use all 5 wide receivers, pinning down any sort of non-Courtland Sutton production is an exercise in futility. Like, good luck pinning production on anybody else in this offense, Troy Franklin included, because you've got the big play stuff with Marvin Mims. You've got them wanting to try to make Pat Bryant a thing. His routes have come up a little bit to like where he's like one of the higher end rotational pieces, but that doesn't really mean anything if you've only got 4 catches for 40 yards on the season. But yeah, Courtland Sutton's role is incredibly strong. 36% of the air yards. Yards per route run is like totally fine, 1.77. It's some of them where where Courtland Sutton can get bogged down in how uncondensed this offense is. More than Mike. Where this offense kind of gets bogged down in terms of the uncondensed nature of it is because the Courtland Sutton like targets per route run less than 20%, like not super great, but at least that if there's one guy that Bo Nix is going to target in this offense, is Courtland Sutton. So like I think he's totally fine, and maybe he's been touchdown dependent the last couple seasons. Certainly as 2023 was. 2024 developed a real rapport with Bo Nix outside of like touchdown stuff. So totally fine with Courtland Sutton. He's probably like a B-, where he's not a sexy option, but he's like a totally cromulent wide receiver 3. Maybe you're stretching it a little bit as a wide receiver 2. But I think Sutton's fine. Let's go over to Detroit. And I know we're like almost 40 minutes in, so I'll speed this up. Monterey St. Brown's awesome. I don't think we really have to talk about him. Set and forget. Wide receiver 1. Jameson Williams ended up was used a lot more, and that I would see this as like maybe a squeaky wheel game last night against Kansas City. 6 for 66 and a touchdown, his best target earning game of the season by far. I don't have the first read stuff in yet in my spreadsheet, but 26% targets per route run last night. Awesome. Still 15% on the year. I think he's really fallen behind of the Sam Laporta stuff. He's fallen behind even both of the running backs, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he's like stuck in like almost purgatory, where because he's so hard to start and redraft. He's a perfect guy for your spike weeks in best ball. Like, I don't want to just like say he's a deep threat and then like dismiss like some of the target earning stuff. I don't think that's fair, but he might be more Mecole Hardman than we want to admit. But I think he has much more upside than Mecole Hardman ever did. Even Mecole Hardman as a first round pick. We're looking at Jameson Williams as a top 10 pick in the draft. So, and I know the role, because he's a second wide receiver, it's a bit tougher when you've got a target dominant guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. When you have a guy that can, dominate in the middle of the field like Sam Laporta, and you have a coach in Dan Campbell that just wants to run the ball. Obviously, he's one of the most daring coaches in terms of like fourth down stuff. But he's a guy that like trusts his guys. So like that's worth something a little bit in like the stuff you can't quantify. But yeah, that makes Jameson Williams like really, really hard to roster and start in redraft. So he would probably be like a C-, where bye weeks are here and you probably have to start him in the majority of leagues. And it's not going to feel great in a lot of weeks. You're going to love when you get the 7 for 149 and 2 touchdowns, but you're not going to love it when you hit, week 5, the 1 for 9 on just one target. So over to the Packers, my team, who look, we're in the same boat here with Buffalo and Denver in terms of uncondensed offenses. It kind of stinks for fantasy. Matthew Golden is still kind of in a little bit of a purgatory here where we're starting to see like him bubble up to the surface, but he's just mainly a low end flex right now. Like he's tough to start. And I know bye weeks where you're kind of handcuffed to having to start like who's on the back end of your roster because you have guys that are out, but he's tough. He's starting to come on a little bit in like the targets per out run stuff. Yards per out run 1.78, like on a per out basis, because the Packers aren't like a super high drop back team. That's where we're talking about some of the inflation. But like it's nice to see that Jordan Love is finally starting to get golden opportunities in the middle of the field, and rather than just like shot plays like a Jameson Williams kind of deal. Romeo Doubs is mildly interesting. Yeah, he had 3 touchdowns in week 4, in that tie against the Dallas Cowboys. Comes out 9 targets, 5 for 55. Not super efficient, but I don't know if we're like quite there with Romeo Doubs. He's a low end flex, just like Golden, but he's like the target earning ish flex, I guess. He is a tough kind of cookie to crack. He's been earning more targets the last couple weeks. Like he's targets per out 30% yesterday against the Bengals. 1.64 yards per out run is like fine. That's average for sure. Yeah, it just does not feel great most of the time when you see like the stat line, when you see the 2 for 25, when you see a 4 for 46. That's like the quintessential Romeo Doubs game. So yeah, Romeo Doubs I'd probably give a D. It's tough because they're not really starting him anyway, but Nico Collins, he's a stud, was on bye this past week. Has been like really the only beacon of light in this past game to talk about, because they want to give routes to Xavier Hutchinson. They want to spread them out to everybody. But like in terms of guys they want to get on the field, and I'm not, obviously this 71% routes against Baltimore, Houston was up big and got a lot of their guys out of there. So I'm obviously not worried about that. But in terms of like efficiency, over 2 yards per out run, 24% targets per out run, first read rate, excellent. Yeah, he's what you want. He's awesome. Not much really else to say here. The Colts obviously got a massive upgrade in their offensive environment. Michael Pittman has been very touchdown dependent this season, like solidly efficient, like okay. He's like a perfect wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team, because the Colts are going to score a ton of points. And he's going to be a big part of that. He's always on the field. But some of the target earning stuff and some of the efficiency stuff, that's where like the Daniel Jones kind of ugliness rears up a little bit. But you can't argue with like some of the results either. Like runs a ton of routes. He's targeted on, almost 1 of every 5 routes he runs, a little over that, 21%. 1.7 yards per out run, like totally fine. Josh Downs, clearly he's a slot only player and still finds the efficiency. Like Josh Downs is where like the spreadsheet bros are salivating every single year, but they fail to account for the fact that that dude has not played an outside snap since the Reagan administration. Caught his first touchdown yesterday. Still earns like targets. We're looking at what, over 5 targets per game, almost 6. Short ADOT, doesn't get a lot of the air yard stuff. Still pretty decently targeted, almost a 19% target share. And then 1.75 yards per route run. Targets per route run, because he doesn't run a full complement, that's going to be inflated as well. 27% of his routes he's targeted on. And he's only out there in 11 personnel in the slot. So in those specific packages, like they want to get Downs involved, and that's how they get him involved, getting 3 wide receivers on the field. So they make sure they get Alec Pierce out there for, whatever reason. And he's the quintessential, all exercise player because he does run a ton of routes when he's on the field, but he just does not earn targets. 15.6% targets per route run for Alec Pierce. That's been pretty much his calling card his entire career. A dude that runs a lot of routes is not super targeted on a lot of those. He's very low in the pecking order. So like Pittman is like a C plus. You want more efficiency out of the targets he's earning. But he's just a touchdown dependent guy right now in an offense. That's a good environment, but it certainly does not help. Brian Thomas Jr., you don't really have to worry about him much anymore because I know some of the efficiency that was lost with Brian Thomas in the first few weeks of the season has really come on in the last 2 weeks. 4 for 80 on 6 targets, 8 for 90 in a touchdown. Best game by far of the season. The target earning has been there. 7, 11, 6, 7, 6, 10. Not worried. The role is strong. Almost 22% targets per route run. 12-yard ADOT, runs all the routes, almost 24% target share, ton of air yards. It's just some of the efficiency stuff with Trevor Lawrence. And I know that's going to be a tougher game because they're going to play in London next week. Obviously, the jet lag is not going to be like super conducive, but you're still probably starting Brian Thomas with buys. So his role, his grade is coming up a little bit, I would say. If I had to grade him, he's a C. A lot of room to improve, though. Good building block game here, the 8 for 90 and a touchdown against Seattle, who maybe that was because Seattle's secondary was entirely banged up with no Devin Witherspoon. I believe their safeties were hurt as well. So, and then Travis Hunter. Let's talk about Travis Hunter here real quick. Ran his most routes, ran his most snaps, still just incredibly inefficient. And I don't know what is up with the fact that they're using him so close to line of scrimmage and they're not like using him as much downfield, but you can't start him. Keep him rostered, perfectly fine. They're targeting him when he does get on the field. Like 18% is like a little bit below average, what you want for like targets per route run. But just not much efficiency, 1.13 yards per route run. Obviously a low ADOT. He really hasn't put up a fancy score that you're like, all right, cool. We're getting we drafted this guy in the 6th round and you're getting less than 10 points per game by far, well below that. So not great, Bob. Kansas City. This one's incomplete for like everybody outside of like Worthy, I guess we can talk about. Rashee Rice is coming back. He's available next week against the Raiders. So we'll see, and he should just slot into his slightly lower than slightly low ADOT role, but like be totally fine. Xavier Worthy is like still kind of working through his shoulder injury. Caught a touchdown. I'm totally fine with starting Xavier Worthy in this offense that is going to put up points as a clear wide receiver 1 over the Marquise Brown, who I know scored 2 touchdowns yesterday, over the Juju Smith-Schuster, who runs routes but probably goes down to 0 when Rashee Rice comes back. And then Tyquan Thornton, I don't believe was even targeted last night, or at least if he was, he wasn't targeted last night. So I think you can send him to 0 pretty easily there. His routes fell like a rock. Went from 80, 78, 78. As soon as Worthy came back, we're looking at a pure rotational player with Thornton. So I don't think you really have to worry about him too much anymore. Worthy is a B- with a lot of room to maneuver going forward. Jacoby Myers and the Raiders, I think it's been really tough without Brock Bowers in Vegas. To where they're going to have to hone in on him. And obviously Trey Tucker is involved there, but he runs a ton of routes. It just does not feel great to start Jacoby Myers at this point. So you're probably going to have to start him in most leagues. If you have him, you just don't feel good about it in this offense. So like 20% targets per route run, 1.63 yards per route run. Those are like fine numbers. It's just you need you need the environment. With Geno Smith, it's been terrible. Whether they go to Aiden O'Connell when he gets back, whether they go to Kenny Pickett, whether they go to somebody else that we don't know, it doesn't make it any easier to start Jacoby Myers, knowing that, hell, if we get rid of Geno Smith, like, can we expect like market improvement? And I don't think we can. Chargers, let's talk about them because QJ was out last week. We're getting the generational Lad McConkey games again, especially yesterday, 7 for 100 and a touchdown. And then a game where Keenan Allen was not really that well involved, 6 targets, 4 for 27. Like, Lad McConkey's been like pumping up the efficiency just a little bit. I know it was really tough because QJ has taken a lot of the market share in that offense to where it's almost like we regard Lad McConkey as like a nothing. And I can't stress this enough. That is not the case. Runs a ton of routes, probably the best ball in hand wide receiver also. But yeah, I'm buying up Lad McConkey where I can, because I think in this offense, knowing that even without their tackles, even without, I mean, can't even say they're without a running game. Kamani Vidal had over 120 yards yesterday. So whether that, remains, will be worth watching. But yeah, I'm buying into Lad McConkey here in kind of this like reclamation phase of having to make up for, like, because the target earning was there, 9.5766, and then now 4, and that's what, what's that? 5 targets, a little over 5 targets per game. Like, that's fine, but actually, that's not right. That's actually not right. Let's 7, I should say. Math's hard. What can I do? But yeah, Quentin Johnson has been awesome when he has played. Almost 2 yards per route run, 21% targets per route run. When you're talking about an offense that's dominated by three wide receivers, it might be hard at times to kind of separate yourself from those receivers, but he's done it. So, and then Keenan Allen has been, running a little bit less routes than QJ and Lad McConkey, but has been like a trusted option, like in the middle of the field. So, totally down for that for Keenan Allen, at least starting him. This one sucks. Puka planted our best wide receiver through 5 games and then, picks up an ankle injury. And now we're likely without him in the London game against Jacksonville. And then they have their bye. So we're hoping that he comes back in week 9 and just leaves off, comes back to right where he left off. So probably for that London game, we're looking at Devontae Adams being like the wide receiver 1 here. And we know, it's hard with a guy like Puka Nacua dominating everything to get yours as well. But look, Devontae Adams is still very efficient in a condensed offense, almost a 2 yards per route run, almost 27% targets per route run. Like, I'm not worried one bit about Devontae Adams. We'll probably see a huge game because he's probably going to be locked up with Greg Newsome. So I do like that spot there for Devontae Adams. And then for like a 1 game thing, Jordan Whittington is basically the Puka Nacua replacement, like almost 1 for 1. Came in, ran 86% of the routes, 92% of the snaps. Production like wasn't quite there, but remember the Rams did only score 17 points as well against the Baltimore Ravens. So I'm down with picking up Jordan Whittington on waivers. I'll write about him in the waiver wire article for Optimus Fantasy. That'll be out the next day or two. Then going over, and we'll hit some of these quick too, because I know we're up against certainly time here. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is hurt out for the season, but Jalen Waddle has really stepped up his game in terms of target earning and being that wide receiver 1 in this offense. We're looking at 27% targets per route run in the last 2 weeks. Massively efficient, and this has always been the case with Jalen Waddle. Even with Tyreek Hill, he's been one of the most efficient wide receivers in football in such a condensed offense that Mike McDaniel runs, that if Jalen Waddle ever got the chance to be like the wide receiver one, and we saw that in his rookie season, where he basically was the wide receiver one until they went out and acquired Tyreek Hill. But we're starting to see, the unquestioned wide receiver one, Jalen Waddle. So I think we have to kind of reevaluate our priors and not looking at Waddle as like a wide receiver two on his own team. That he's probably he's a fantasy wide receiver two. If this is what we're gonna get out of him, we're gonna get to just hyper targeting the guy, one of every 4 routes over that he's been targeted. So definitely a fan. One of the easiest buys in fantasy right now, where the Dolphins maybe behind the scenes looking like a dumpster fire, but he's a guy you want to buy. Over to Minnesota, I don't think I have to really mention much about Justin Jefferson, Planet Earth's best wide receiver. If you're going to fight aliens, and for some reason you needed wide receiver skills to do that, Justin Jefferson would be my pick. Nothing, look, 24% targets per out run, massively efficient, 2.57 yards per out run. Can't say much about him. Jordan Addison, though, who I know they were on bye last week. He had come back off his 3-game suspension. 2 pretty solid weeks, 4 for 114, 5 for 41. The quarterback whisperer, Kevin O'Connell, strikes again with Carson Wentz and kind of reining him in. Now, Carson Wentz is going to have his Carson Wentz generational dumbass performance that we're going to talk about on social media ad infinitum. But as it stands right now, playing second fiddle, Justin Jefferson, and I would say he's well over TJ Hawkinson in that regard as well. Like perfectly fine stuff. Runs almost all the routes. 1.87 yards per out run. You want to see some of the targets per out run stuff comes up because they do kind of have spread it. They have spread the ball to like the Jalen Naylor stuff, and the 75% yards per route. The routes. He was suspended because he missed the walkthrough in that London game. So, but he is typically like a 95 to 100% route run player. So not worried there. Jefferson will always get an A+ in my mind. Jordan Addison has a little bit to build off of too. So I would probably give him B-. It's incomplete right now. Over in New England, where Stephon Diggs is finally given Drake May, league MVP Drake May, by the way, a top target, at least the previous 2 weeks from yesterday. 3 for 28. It was a Kayshon Boutte day. Narrative Street was buzzing. Shout out John and Pemba for that, by the way, calling out the Kayshon Boutte stuff where he went to LSU, grew up 70 miles from the Caesars Superdome. So, but yeah, like Stephon Diggs runs a ton of routes. I think more often than not, you could probably pencil him in for leading this team in targets. If it's going to be Drake May doing that, targeting somebody, I think it's going to be Diggs over any of the other options in like most weeks. So I'm not worried about at least this dud game in week 6 from him. He's really leveled up the efficiency though, because he wasn't running a ton of routes, but he was like fine on them. Look, we were at 70%, 58, 55, and then up to 82, where 6 for 101 and then 10 for 46 on just 64% of routes. Like that's going to pop in targets per out run, in yards per out run. So that's where you can get a little bit inflated there with some of that. Over to New Orleans, where for a while there, it was Chris Olave doing his best Jacoby Myers impression, but it was nice to see him get downfield a little bit more. They hit him on a deep shot very early on in the game. And I know we're coming up on an hour. I'm going to hit every team before I get out of here too. But yeah, it was nice to see him get a deep shot early on in the game. Double-digit targets in 5 or 6 weeks. Like, Chris Olave hasn't been super sexy. He only has 1 touchdown. And I know the Saints offense hasn't been like super great either, but he's a guy that you can like hang your hat on for a guy that Spencer Rattler is going to target. 31% target share. Some of the efficiency isn't there, 1.58, because of just the sheer amount of routes he runs. But targets per outrun, you know that Spencer Rattler is targeting him. 28% targets per outrun. That's got to be up there with some of the leaders in terms of that. And yeah, Chris Olave is 3rd in targets per outrun among all wide receivers with at least 75 routes. Puka Nacua, JSN, Chris Olave, Amon St. Brown, Lamb, Evans, Downs, Drake London. Yeah, you're right there with the best of the best in terms of like target earning. So Chris Olave has to be a wide receiver, a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 for fantasy. And then Rashid Shaheed's a lot more spotty. Like he still like earns targets and he's like fine. Obviously, you're gonna get the blow-up game, but that's more of a best ball play to where you gotta be a really sneaky and shrewd manager to put him in redraft lineups. Like it doesn't feel good putting Rashid Shaheed in. You got to have like a specific play in mind to start him. But yeah, like quite a bit of air yards. Obviously, the role is somewhat strong there. Runs a ton of routes, but yeah, moderately efficient because he's like a deeper, down the field play. That's where the yards per outrun still pops a little bit there. 19% targets per outrun. Look, if Goddard and Kamani Vidal are out there, you got to take Vidal, seeing as what, for what we saw last week, over 120 yards rushing, the clear role over Hassan Haskins. I'll just pull this up here real quick for the LA Chargers. Yeah, we're looking at 67% snaps for Kamani Vidal, 56% of routes, well over Hassan Haskins, 22 opportunities for him to 7 for Hassan Haskins. And yes, Amari DiMercado had 3 snaps and 1 route yesterday. So DiMercado is a clear drop. He has been put in the pine box by Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon. So yeah, that's DiMercado is an absolutely clear drop for fantasy. Let's go back to we were at Shaheed. So yeah, he feels like more of a best ball kind of play, where it's almost it never feels good to roster him. But yeah, Olave, for what he's given you in terms of like pure target volume, earning targets, B+. I think he still has room to grow production wise. Although you got to know the offense in New Orleans is not super great and super conducive, but if they're going to hyper target one guy, you want obviously that guy. Giants, tough. No Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors was on deck to have like the generational season, and then shit hit the fan. Tough to see. Wandale has had to kind of put it together a little bit. We're looking at it's like decent target earning, but you're never gonna. He's a flex play. Like he's a pure flex play rather than a wide receiver 1, because this offense is being built around Cam Scatterbo and Jackson Dart's legs more than anything else in the passing game. So the fact that they're willing to take Lil Jonah Humphrey off of the practice squad and immediately give him 94% of routes because Darius Slayton was hurt should tell you where we're at with the Giants in terms of their passing game. So, like, for what Wandale Robinson is, I mean, he's probably like a C-. You're not expecting the world out of Wandale Robinson, but for what he is like a somewhat regular target earner. 20% targets per outrun, 1.7 yards per outrun. A lot of that is bolstered by the 8 for 142 and a touchdown game that he had in week 2, where he was running like a massive ADOT. And then we're kind of seeing that normalized here because 3.3, 60.7, 21.3. Obviously, those were the spikes. That was with neighbors. 0.8, 6.3, 6.7, where he's had to run like almost semi-regular ADOTs, but is still used at the line of scrimmage. So yeah, that's tough. A tough situation with the Giants. Wandale is like, yeah, I would say C-. Over the Jets, who look, the Jets set back quarterbacking and NFL offensive football back about 30 years yesterday in their game against Denver. Justin Fields can support Garrett Wilson. There's nobody else to really support. Semi-regularly Mason Taylor, maybe, but like it's one game and it's a shitty game, and we all want to talk about, how Justin Fields is a terrible quarterback. And like real world wise, he probably is not a good one. But for the purposes of like being able to support a guy like Garrett Wilson, he's done that and then some. 4 touchdowns. We're looking at 6 games. We're looking at almost 6 catches a game. We're looking at 63 yards. We're looking at what? An average line of 9 targets, 6 for 63, and a touchdown like 2 out of every 3 games. Who wouldn't take that? 6 for 63, that's 12.3. That's 18.3 fantasy points on average. Who wouldn't take that? I think some of this talk about the Jets has really just gone. People have gone way over their skis with this. I know it's tough for Garrett Wilson because there's nobody else that's really around him that's commanding targets in this offense that poses even the tiniest of threats to Garrett Wilson. The only like real threat for Garrett Wilson or for defenses has been Justin Fields' legs, and that could open up stuff for Wilson. But for what Wilson has done, and I know Tyrod Taylor, whatever, the main part of this offense outside of like Breece Hall is to get Garrett Wilson the ball, and they're doing that. I don't get what some of these people are talking about. Targeted on almost 1 of every 4 routes he runs. 1.77 yards per route run. He runs an absolute ton of routes. So that's going to get that's actually probably lower than it should be. But yeah, 44% of the air yards. First read target rate, 44.7%. You know where the ball is going in the passing game. And you don't think defenses know that? And they still can't like fully stop him? I mean, I know Pat Surtain was on him yesterday, and the Jets had one of the worst offensive performances we've seen in a long time, but I think we're overreacting to that a bit much. Garrett Wilson is still a very fine mid-range wide receiver too. For the Eagles, who have had to pass a little bit more in recent weeks after A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith were wanting some more passing game involvement. Like A.J. Brown has been a little bit subpar. I mean, whether that's an Eagles thing, a Jalen Hurts thing, a Nick Sirianni thing, Kevin Patullo thing, kind of remains to be seen. What we do know, A.J. Brown is seeing all the routes. Maybe a 20.8% targets per route one's like not great. Devonta Smith's at 17.2. Oh, by the way, I want to give Garrett Wilson A+ for what he's doing on this offense when defenses know he's getting the ball. But yeah, so like we know when the offense in the passing game, we know where the ball is going. It's going to A.J. Brown. It's going to Devonta Smith. It's going to Dallas Goedert as well. It makes it hard. You got to start A.J. Brown because we know the Eagles are going to like find their way as an offense. They have not looked great. They played down to teams. Devonta Smith has probably flashed a little bit more, but even him still not super great. But I think you still have to start them. I'd give them both kind of a shared grade. I'd give them both a C-. Because if the Eagles are going to be in more games, so they're not blowing out teams, they're going to have to pass more. They're going to have to find more efficiency. Or else they're going to make the playoffs and be a wild card exit. They're going to lose to like the Seahawks or something, or the Rams. Pittsburgh, there's really only one name to talk about here because, the Steelers gutted everybody and brought in DK Metcalf. But Metcalf's been fine. He's probably another Pittman, another Sutton, where he is much more touchdown dependent than we want to realize. He gets targeted a ton by Aaron Rodgers. 22% targets per route run, 2.5 yards per route run. Like, very efficient. But we know where the ball is going in this offense. It's a mix of like Michael Pittman and Garrett Wilson in terms of when the passing game is like really going, he is the one that's getting the targets. But efficiency has he's always underperformed in terms of efficiency. DK Metcalf has. That's going back to like Seattle. We've always wanted more out of DK Metcalf. And now he's the top target in an Arthur Smith offense. So, I mean, that's where we're at. I think DK Metcalf's been like totally fine though. Like the target earning, like the 4.4335, like in terms of like receptions. He had that big huge catch and go in London, or in Dublin, I should say, against the Vikings. He had a big touchdown yesterday against the Browns. But other than that, yeah, it's a little bit lean. And if the Steelers, the Steelers are doing pretty well record-wise. But if they fall on some hard times, that could definitely trickle down to DK Metcalf. And it doesn't help, it helps Metcalf that they really haven't had much of a consistent run game either. Like outside of that blow-up game in Dublin with Kenny Gainwell, Jaylen Warren's been like okay, but not like somebody you like super need to start every week. That's helped DK Metcalf. San Francisco, where everybody is hurt. Juwan Jennings has as many broken ribs as 3 times as many broken ribs as fantasy points yesterday. So that's where we're at. But you think some teams could use a guy like Kendrick Bourne? Because Kendrick Bourne in the last 2 weeks has put up back-to-back 142-yard games. Without Ricky Pearsall, they're trotting out MVS and Sky Moore and DeMarcus. It looks like the back end of an abandoned dynasty roster. And yet Kendrick Bourne is still like a massive stud. 20 targets in his last 2 games. 7.5 targets, 142 yards. Last 2 games. We're looking at 35% air yards, 24% targets per outrun the last 2 games, 3.5 yards per outrun. We're probably getting George Kittle back in week 7 against the Falcons. We'll see about Juwan Jennings, whether they just shut him down. Because, look, playing through bruised ribs, or playing through broken ribs. Bruised ribs is one thing. Broken ribs is like, that affects your breathing. That affects a lot of what you do. So whether they get Pearsall back is another thing. But if you're still having all these guys out and like Kendrick Bourne is still out there, he's going to be a very popular pickup off of waivers, and I'll write about him too. It's hard to grade Kendrick Bourne on 2 games, especially when he was not a featured part of the offense really in weeks 2 through 4. But like the return on investment, if you bought in week 5, and these are the 2 games that you get from Kendrick Bourne, I mean, it's hard to do anything else but an A, right? Let's get to the outside of Puka Nacua, the best that planet Earth has to offer in terms of like 2025 production, Jackson Smith and Jigba. The dude's been on fire. 9 targets on average. You know, we're looking at what? 9 targets per game, 7 receptions, over 100 yards per game, 3 touchdowns. You know the offense is going to JSN when he's on the field. Almost half of the team's air yards. Intent by the offense to get him the ball through the air. 37% target share. Runs all the routes. 42% through week 5. 42% first read target rate. 34% targets per out run. 4.43 yards per out run. Just to give you a heads up, the leader last season was Puka in a shortened campaign, but he was at like a 3.4. Nico Collins was above a 3. Brandon Ayuk, I believe in 2022 is above a 3. Over 4 is like college numbers. And then that would be like well above the average there, or well above the top guys there. Like that probably can't continue. But that just shows you how massively efficient Jackson Smith and Jigba has been. And if you're redrafting 2025, I mean, JSN's right there with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb, right? He has to be. Where are you going to draft him in 2026 if he keeps this up? He's going to be right in league with those guys. Sam Darnold's out here supporting a wide receiver 1, like the overall wide receiver 1. With Puka Nacua likely out a game, that's going to give JSN a little bit more of a head start. Yeah. JSN's been just words can't even express how good JSN has been. And then going over to like Cooper Kupp, it's been okay. 20% target share, 20%, almost a 20% targets per out run, 1.73. Like, we're not even talking about Cooper Kupp. And obviously, Cooper Kupp is not what Cooper Kupp used to be. Definitely not anywhere close to like 2021 Cooper Kupp. Definitely not even like the last couple seasons. But Cooper Kupp per route has been like fine. He's just well overshadowed by JSN. That doesn't make Cooper Kupp a start by any means. He's probably a low-end flex play. But that's just kind of where we're at with Seattle. JSN's just a monster. A++ for JSN. I didn't want to spoil the grade on the graphic. Tampa's tough. They've been ravaged with injuries. Mike Evans has been out the last 3 weeks. Chris Godwin is now hurt. Emeka Egbuka left the game. Emeka Egbuka has been awesome. 2.4 yards per out run, 21% targets per out run in that offense. He's been running hot on touchdowns too, but like Egbuka was awesome. Now probably misses a game at least with a hamstring injury. We'll see about that. To where they're running out, obviously Sterling Shepard has run a ton of routes, and Sterling Shepard is clearly not where he was in his heyday with the Giants. They're running out Tez Johnson. He caught a touchdown. His only catch, a 45-yard score. Cameron Johnson has been out there running some routes as well. 4 for 64 and a touchdown. It makes it really hard to start these guys. And then they got to go play Detroit with a depleted secondary. That makes it even like I'd probably lean to Tez Johnson if I were going to like start anybody. Like Sterling Shepard has like the track record, but they've clearly given Tez Johnson some ramp up in the last few weeks, and he's produced. even though Tess Johnson is like 3'6" and 111 pounds, he makes he makes Devonta Smith look like DK Metcalf. But I think Tess Johnson would be my lean in this passing game. If I were going to pick one of these guys, if Evans is out, Godwin's out, Ibuka's out, it would probably be Tess Johnson. So it's hard to grade. Like Ibuka would be an A+, just for what he's done the past 5 games. Godwin and Evans are pretty incomplete there. Over to Tennessee, like Calvin Ridley got hurt, played 4 snaps or 4 routes, 6 snaps out of the game. He had a really good week 5 for 131, to where you were hoping that maybe Cam Ward would be turning a corner. Turns out that wasn't the case, because Cam Ward's looking not great, Bob. The fact that you're still getting Tyler Lockett on the field, and his routes and snaps have decreased. So but the fact that once Ridley went out, it was Van Jefferson. I'm not going to waste any more words on Van Jefferson. We know what he's about. It's not good. Alec Iomanner, I think we're on the hopium. We talked about him the first 2 weeks of the season as an option for to get ahead of your league mates. But I don't think there's enough growth in this offense to necessitate maybe even not even rostering him right now. I think this offense is so toxic in terms of, especially if Ridley's out. I think, you know what? If Ridley is out, maybe Iomanner gets another shot to just be the target earning wide receiver 1 in this offense, and that's how he takes that job. So yeah, if you have Iomanner, hold on to him. He's probably a buy on waivers if he's still out there. It all depends on Ridley's health, because if Ridley's playing, then I'm just not starting him. Even DFS, a punt play, I'm not starting him. But yeah, the Tennessee stuff is tough because Cam Ward has not looked really that good. It's certainly not my favorite way to play the Tennessee Football Titans. And then this is a little bit tougher too. Our last team here, the Washington Commanders, because Terry McLaurin's been out for the last 3 weeks. Or last 2 weeks, I should say. Deebo Samuel, though, has filled in admirably. We wanted to see whether he had something left. Deebo Samuel definitely does. And this is an offense that I wish would just figure out a way to get younger. Bringing in almost 30-year-old Deebo Samuel was a move that I criticized, because you're trying to infuse some youth in this offense. You already had Terry McLaurin. You already had Zach Ertz. You had some pieces, you drafted Jalen Lane. You had Luke McCaffrey, but you're still trotting out. I mean, Noah Brown's been hurt, but McLaurin, obviously, they just paid, and deservedly so, because he's been in Washington almost that entire time with bad teams, and now you're rewarding him for that. So that's fine. But then bringing in Deebo, obviously retaining Ertz, it's an offense that really needs more juice. And Deebo can do that on a short-term basis. I don't know if this is something that's going to last in the during the full, run out of the season. But for what he's given us, 25% targets per route run, 2.05 yards per route run, totally fine. They're using him less rushing wise. He only has 7 carries on the season through 5 games. They play tonight, obviously. But yeah, he's running a bunch of routes. He's earning targets. What more do you want? Would I trade Dottle for Breece Hall? I would say aim for the stars. I think you can get more for Dowdle based on the last 2 weeks. You can find the sucker in fantasy leagues. You can find the sucker that'll trade you better play. I mean, Breece Hall, don't get me wrong, I think is a perfectly, excellent player. I think you can do better than Breece Hall if you're going to try to capitalize on 2 weeks of Rico Dowdle. I think you could even get Saquon Barkley based on like the inefficiency stuff from Saquon Barkley and knowing that we'll probably have better weeks ahead. I think you could probably swing that. If you're looking for running backs, I think you could probably do James Cook for Dowdle. I mean, I would hold him for another week. I know it's tough. I'd say if you can't get a deal done, if you're looking to trade him, see what you can get for him. If there's not a trade to your liking, I would probably hold him. I don't think he's going to put up 200 yards this week, although I did say that last week as well. Also, Rico Dowdle was the first player, second player since 2020 to have 200 yards from scrimmage in back-to-back games, joining Dalvin Cook. So, do I think he can make it 3 for 3? Odds are probably not. Would I be shocked? Yes and no. I think if you can get a trade done, then trade him. If not, then I'd hold him. And then he could probably, if he puts up 100 yards and, if he puts up 100 yards and a touchdown, you'll probably get more for him. Yeah, I understand about Chuba Hubbard. I understand with that. It is hard to put the genie back in the bottle with a guy like Rico Dowdle, or Chuba hasn't even been like super efficient this season. Let me pull him up here. Yeah, like Chuba's been fine. 4 yards per carry. They've changed the offense around Rico Dowdle where the Panthers were like leaning a little bit pass heavy, and then they just completely leaned into the run with Rico Dowdle and are having success. So the one thing that can change a team's fortunes is like some of the success that they're having, especially in the run game, where it's hard for teams to go away from that if they're having success and winning games because of it. So for that, I think Rico Dowdle is probably a guy that probably gets the higher end of the split, because that's what, remember, Chuba Hubbard has been an efficient back the last couple of years. He was not as efficient last season in that full-time role. Obviously, no Jonathan Brooks. Oh, very little Jonathan Brooks. They drafted him pretty highly, and it's going to be out again this season. But they finally paid Chuba Hubbard, and then he gets hurt. Now you get these 2 games out of Rico Dowdle that can, because they won those games, makes it hard for a team to go back the other way when they're not winning games. We're talking about year 2 of Dave Canales, where we haven't seen a lot from Bryce Young in terms of incremental steps like we've seen with Drake May. We're seeing those incremental steps in terms of like building blocks and becoming like a legit successful quarterback in the NFL. We haven't seen that to like that degree with Bryce Young. So one way to like kind of save yourself a little bit of that is to, once you have something in the run game that works and now you're winning games off of that, it's really hard to get back to where you were with Chuba Hubbard and back to like the passing stuff. And do I think Rico Dowdle is going to be able to keep up like his workload? 23 carries and 30 carries in the past 2 games. That's what? 26 opportunities and 34 opportunities. That's 29.5 per game. Can't keep that up. Look at Saquon Barkley this season. Can't keep that up. Look at like some of the Derrick Henry's an anomaly, but like guys that have taken on just these massive workloads, that's not sustainable. But on the other hand, with Chuba, if they can manage him a little bit, if they can manage Rico Dowdle a little bit with some Chuba Hubbard stuff and make that all work, then that's probably a net positive for Rico long term. It's hard to talk about Rico long term, but like just for the reasons I talked about with wanting to maintain some of what is working in the Carolina offense, which is clearly running the ball and keeping the ball not out of Bryce Young's hands, but like helping manage him a bit. That helps the entire offense. That's going to help them win games. And if that's helping them win games, they're not going to go away from that. So that's where I stand with Rico Dowdle. Again, if you have him, I would try to trade him. If there's not an offer to your liking, I would hold him. Because I don't think he just goes back. You can't put the toothpaste back on the tube. Yeah. So look, that was we went a little long on clock management. Well, I wanted to get through all 32 teams in terms of like some of their wide receiver stuff. So thanks for tuning in. If you haven't, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to Optimus Fantasy. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff in terms of our data. Batting Optimizer is up. We're gonna have a new projections tool coming out very, very soon, certainly this week. So excited about that as well. But yeah, I'm Kevin Tompkins. Next week, same bad time, same bad channel, and we will see you next week.